So the gold and silver short squeeze has officially started the bank collapses, and it looks as if contagion could be spreading to the rest of the world. This week we saw a bank collapse in Chicago, in America. We also saw a bank collapse in China. We can see this is a $20 billion bank that just overnight froze all of the gold and silver in the bank. And they're not the only region around the world having a little bit of struggle. We can see that $15 trillion was wiped off the gold and silver market this week. Everybody's been staring at this candle and this wild chart and asking themselves, why? What's happening? Well, I think it has to do with the world's largest bank. We can see that JP Morgan actually had an enormous $10 billion short position open on gold and silver until that day that we saw one of the biggest crashes in gold and silver's history. We're going to be looking at just how significant this is in a moment. Again, this is a 10 sigma event. This is a 10 standard deviation event. This is absolutely nuts what just happened in the market. And I think it's the biggest case of manipulation that I have ever seen. Because right now we can see that the Shanghai silver premium, it rose by 50% in one day. So that means the price of silver in China is like $150 an ounce. In Dubai, it's $160 an ounce. But in America, it was $120 an ounce, and it got slammed down in the 70s in one day. So that's nearly a 40% correction in one day. Again, everybody's looking at the charts and they're wondering what's happening. Why are the prices acting in this unnatural way? Well, that's because the biggest banks in the world, they've been caught naked. Have a look at this. Have a look at when JP Morgan closed this $10 billion short position. This here in the white little contract here, this is an official contract from the COMEX Gold Exchange. And you can see the price that this short was closed by JP Morgan Securities. I hope you guys can see it. It's at $78.29 per ounce for silver. Again, if you have a look at the chart, which is the bottom part of this little image I've got for you, look at where JP Morgan closed its silver short position. It was nearly at the absolute bottom after a 39% crash in one day. How significant is this? $7 billion worth of shorts. Again, let's put this into context for a moment. A lot of people remember what happened to GameStop in 2021. Everybody was like, how can the White House, the US government, literally pick up the phone, ring Robinhood, and say, turn off the buy button? That was because there was one hedge fund who was $10 billion underwater. Again, I'm trying to put things into context here. If there's a hedge fund that has $10 billion worth of losses, that can become contagious. That can begin to trigger a wave of liquidity crises all across the world. And this is what we're seeing, okay? I want to get into China and India in a moment, and the UK. The UK Mint, which has been creating and selling silver and gold coins for 1,000 years, has officially closed. They're not selling any more metal, which is nuts. We have Australia's biggest mint closed. We have a lot to cover. Let's dive into maybe this Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan angle first, because they are not the only big bank massively short gold and silver. I want to show you guys something else that I found pertaining to Citibank and Bank of America. Let me try to share my screen correctly. I closed down the tab I wanted to show you, but here it is. Bank of America has 1,000 leverage contracts of silver open right now. Citibank has 3,400. In total, they are short 4.4 billion ounces of silver. Now, this is where the criminality comes into this. We know that you can only mine 800 million ounces of silver every year. So right now, Bank of America and Citibank are short more than 5 times the annual supply of physical silver. So you have JP Morgan pulling off one of the trades of a century, closing their short position at $74 an ounce, closing a $10 billion short position. And then you have Bank of America and Citibank all massively short silver. This is why Donald Trump came out in the last 24 hours and made a very interesting comment. Donald Trump says, I won't read the whole thing. I won't read the whole thing because, as you can see, it's a lengthy tweet. But the summary of this is it is now a national security risk to not begin printing money. Again, ask yourself, if we've already started QE, where's all that freshly printed money going? It's probably going to the banks to allow them to short gold and silver, or it's going to the banks to cover the holes and the losses in their balance sheet that shorting silver and gold has caused them. We're beginning to see some really interesting signs that I think the bankers, the government, and the central bankers have all lost control. I don't want to get too hyperbolic, but I think the next week could get really interesting because there's a very specific reason why gold and silver was smashed when it was. It was Friday. It was the last trading day of the month, and markets are supposed to open up again on the 2nd of February. That is going to be a Monday. And I don't want to give away too much too soon. It's going to get really interesting. But again, I think the context here is this gold and silver price smash. I think it's telling us something broader about the financial system. Again, if the Federal Reserve Chair is being asked about gold and silver, this is massive. And again, what was the biggest topic on the lips of everybody this week at the World Economic Forum conference that wrapped up last Tuesday or Wednesday? It was all economic reset. They were all petrified of an economic reset. Let's cover this first clip from Jerome Powell to bring you guys up to speed about the Fed chair even being asked about gold and silver.
Increases we've seen for precious metals.
Don't take much message macroeconomically. The argument can be made that we're losing credibility or something. It's simply not the case. If you look at where inflation expectations are, our credibility is right where it needs to be. So we look at those things. We don't get spun up over particular asset price changes, although we do monitor them, of course.
So I think they are absolutely losing credibility. This is why we saw the historic smashdown that we did see in America. This chart here, this is an interesting chart. In the red line, we're going to be looking at the price of silver in China. And then in the blue line, we're going to be looking at the price of silver in the paper markets in America, to show you the degree of manipulation and absolute theft that we've seen in the Western markets. You can see in the West, the price of silver is in the low 80s, but over there in Shanghai, in China, it's 120. Think about how significant that is for just one moment. This crash literally broke all sorts of records. It's not even comparable to how wild this is. Again, I think Peter Schiff here actually adds a little bit of signal to the debate here. Peter tweets this out after the Jerome Powell clip, and Peter says, Powell basically said that the recent jump in gold is irrelevant to Fed policy. But when former Fed Chair Greenspan was in office, he said that he watched gold very closely as it was the best indicator of whether interest rates were too low or too high. How can a once critical metric no longer be relevant? This here is actually a really good tweet from Peter Schiff, because it is true. Central bankers have admitted for years that they watch gold and silver very closely. Many central bankers, not just in the US have all admitted the same thing. So I think for Powell to come out and say that, I think it's a little bit of signal that he's literally pissing on your back and telling you it's raining. Don't trust this guy. There's also some interesting 4D chess moves and scenarios here I do want to discuss today. There's lots of angles to this. Some people are talking about a gold revaluation. Obviously, there's a lot of chit chat about China sitting on 20,000 metric tons of gold, which is kind of nuts. We'll get there. I want to first cover just how significant this event was, this smackdown or this crash. I've got a couple of charts that puts it into perspective, and I want to show you those before we get into the next clips. So I've showed you this. This is the Shanghai Premium in silver. But what I want to talk about is the 10 Sigma event. Because again, a lot of people are going to hear that and they're like, what are you talking about, Luke? What is that? What is a 10 standard deviation event? Well, I've had a look at it and we've crunched some numbers. So you can see on the bottom, this is showing us the move that we just saw in silver. And this is a 60-year chart. So you can see the move that we just saw is the biggest move in history for silver. Now, what is a 10 Sigma event? It is, from what I saw on Twitter, it was a 1 in a 5 septillion event. So what does that mean? Let's put it into context. 1,000,000 years is a lot of years. Nobody's alive for 1,000,000 years. Nobody's alive for 1 billion, 1 trillion, 1 quadrillion, 1 quintillion, sextillion, and then you get septillion. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times 3. That's 24 zeros. That's how many years you would have to wait to see another event like what we just saw in the silver markets. A 1 in a 5 septillion event. Again, this is just what I found on Twitter. I haven't crunched the maths myself, but I think it puts it into context. Silver's move was absolutely unprecedented. It should have been mathematically impossible to see silver crash by 39% in a day. Supposed to be mathematically impossible. But again, this leads us to the broader question. Are we simply living through a reset? Well, the world's most successful hedge fund manager, Ray Dalio, he seems to think so. Let's listen to what he said this week. Again, everybody is talking about the gold and silver price spike. Let's tune into what he said.
Beginning of the end of the monetary system as we know it.
Beginning of the end. Again, that's about as big as a claim as it gets.
It's not just the US dollar, it's the fiat monetary currencies. So the UK, the euro, Japan, China all have similar debt problems and so on, and are dealing with the same interrelationships, which is the reason you're seeing gold being chosen by the central banks. They want a currency. Gold has always been the main currency, and it's the only non-fiat currency, in other words, not the currency that can't be printed, that they want. And so that's why you're seeing central banks move and sovereign wealth funds move to gold, and that's the nature of the shift of the monetary system.
So I think Ray Dalio kind of puts it pretty simply there for most people who are maybe just not quite reacting to what is going on right now. Again, a 10 standard deviation move is supposed to never happen. It's supposed to be mathematically impossible, but I think what we're seeing is a simple breakdown in the monetary system right now. Again, I think the big question that a lot of us have is what's going to happen on Monday? Are we going to see more bank collapses? Are the markets even going to open? I think we've got a lot of things to look at that kind of shows that many of the bullion banks are completely closed. And now if we actually have real banks in America going belly up, what's going to happen on Monday when the markets close? Again, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but this week is like one of the weeks where you wake up to a closed bank account and they don't reopen. Again, what do they call it? A resolution weekend. If you're ever going to see one, it would be this week. So again, anybody who has a lot of their financial wealth in the system, I'm not a financial advisor, but I would be paying very close attention to what is happening this week. Again, 39% in one day, $15 trillion of wealth wiped off gold and silver in a day. That is not natural market conditions. That's manipulated very clearly. To watch $15 trillion of wealth just wiped. Again, America's GDP, the biggest country in the world, most economically advanced country in the world, they produce $30 trillion of wealth a year. Half of that was gone in 12 hours. This is as manipulated as it gets, which is why Peace, Love, Light, Truth in the chat says comprehensive cyber threat. Oh, somebody's reading my mind, because something I wanted to show you guys today was this tweet from Chris Martenson regarding the gold and silver technical issues. We can see London Metal Exchange resumes trade after technical glitch. We can see another bank, HSBC, suspiciously suffers a temporary system shutdown, stopping services in Hong Kong. Why are we seeing all of this behavior? Again, we got banks in America literally going belly up right now. Look at the date of this article, the 30th of January at 8 p.m. We talked about this on a live stream on Friday. We said, look out, there's been rumblings and rumors that a bank has collapsed. A lot of people call this conspiracy theories, but we now have confirmation. Officials have wound down the Chicago-based Metropolitan Capital Bank on Friday. The failure is the first of 2026. I mean, don't you think the wording of that is interesting? The first. Does that mean more are going to come? Again, we've been talking about a lot of the warning signs on this channel for months now. All of the language with the digital money, the CBDCs coming out of the UK and Europe. We've been saying, why are they talking about savings limits? Why are they so hyper-focused on holding limits, savings caps? Why? It's so strange. They're trying to create the digital prison. Again, if you've missed all of that content, make sure you subscribe. We make videos talking about these topics nearly every day. Because again, this is the stuff they don't want you to see or hear. Who's talking about bank collapses right now? Nobody. Everybody's talking about gold and silver, but what's the underlying issue here? We can see this is the first collapse of 2026. It's estimated to cost the FDIC $19 million. So Metropolitan Bank reported $43 million in liabilities against advances from the Federal Home Loan Bank system in the third quarter of 2025. FDIC Chair Travis Hill's stated priority to resolve and sell failed banks quickly to prevent their value from eroding. Do you think they're a little bit scared? Do you think they're worried of a little bit of a banking crisis? I'll remind you guys right now, the banks are sitting on huge unrealized losses, which is why I'm personally a little bit more, let's say, skeptical that this gold and silver rally is over. Again, these are the losses on the balance sheets of the banks right now. Huge. This is a 20-year chart. This goes back to 2006. Have a look at the losses on the balance sheet during the 2008 global financial crisis. They were minuscule compared with what we are seeing here post-2022. Why are we seeing this post-2022? It's because all these banks are sitting on toxic assets. They're sitting on US Treasury bonds, which for 50 years were the savings vehicle for the entire world. Not anymore. What's the chart we always look at on this channel? For the first time in a very long time, we are seeing central banks hold more gold than US government bonds. This is the first time in, I believe, 30 years, since the 1990s. These banks weren't prepared for that phase shift. So many people are looking at their little models and their fancy spreadsheets, and they're saying, oh, things have got to go back to normal because I have this 50-year data set of what normally happens. Guys, we're in reset times. We're at the end of an 80-year long-term debt cycle. This is not going back to normal. People are not just going to buy bonds. Again, let me put this in a perspective. So many people have been wrecked buying the dip of TLT. This chart tells you everything you need to know. Holy shit. Sorry, I don't think I could say that on a live stream, but look at this. For 50 years, bonds went up in price while central banks were able to get away with the illusion of printing money and lowering interest rates. Then we entered a new regime in 2020. Since then, the world's saving vehicle, the US 20-year safe and liquid bond, the TLT, is down 53%. This is a phase shift. All of the models that all of these gurus, these financial experts are talking about, they're all wrong. They're all broken. They all assume we're going back to normal. We're not. People are dumping government bonds. Trust has been lost, and the biggest banks around the world are freaking out. Again, I'll remind you, this article and prediction came out from JP Morgan on the morning of the 30th, January 30th, yesterday morning, as silver was at $125 an ounce. JP Morgan, we can see, former chief strategist at JP Morgan isn't mincing his words. He's calling for silver to trade at roughly half its current price later this year. This note came out on the very morning that silver got smashed 50% in a day. Nearly cryptic. Let me show you exactly where this gentleman published this report for JP Morgan. Literally here. Oh, we expect silver to cut in half. 2 hours later, bam, it got cut in half. Kind of saying the quiet parts out loud. This is why I firmly believe this is one of the biggest cases of manipulation I have ever seen. Look at this. I still can't believe that this is real. This is a COMEX report showing that JP Morgan closed they closed their short position at $78.29. 3 hours after they absolutely trashed the market. This is as blatant as it gets. And again, I'll remind you, I've got some more charts in a moment that I want to show to you guys. But again, I want to remind you, let's put things into context here. The World Economic Forum conference was just happening in Davos last week. We did a video every single day here on the channel talking about everything happening in Davos. And the big theme coming out of Davos was economic resets. They're all freaking out. They're all accelerating their push towards digital money because they know the system's broken. Again, this is the commissioner of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen.
1971 was the year of the so-called Nixon shock and the decision to delink the US dollar from gold.
When do these elites ever talk about gold and silver? Ask yourselves. Never. Again, we've been covering the World Economic Forum conference for years. They never mention gold explicitly or any of these economic resets. They're very cryptic with their language. If they are openly coming out and naming the dollar getting reset from gold and dealings from gold, this is massive. This is very big. This should tell you maybe they know another reset is coming. I want to play another clip before I play the rest of that one from Ursula.
Fact that a lot of attention, there is so much to unpack when it comes to what happened this week in Davos. I think it was probably one of the most important sessions that they've had since their inception in 1971. But one thing that I wanted to share with the posse is the fact that a lot of attention was paid to the sort of geopolitical reshuffling and, you know, this new world order and the changes to this new world order and what that entails. But there is one thing that I think is very important and we mustn't lose sight of, is the fact that in the background, parallel to the AI focus, the topic of many of the panels this week was actually on the economics and the new, quote, financial reset that they've been preparing and building out for many years. And so I just want to read a couple of the panel's titles to give a little bit of context to what I'm saying. So you have, is tokenization the future? Where are we on stable coins? A new era for finance, banking accelerated, central banking beyond the mandate. And so what we are seeing is all these heads of central banks like Christine Lagarde of the ECB, IMF head, WTO head, and various international financial institutions getting together, having these conversations, especially with Larry Fink, the new mayor in town, the co-interim chair, leading many of these discussions. And what we have to understand is that there is this reset that is coming, this 100% digitalization of the entire financial structure. I mean, we're quasi entirely digitized when it comes to our financial services and the financial system, but we're talking about a 100% digitalization with CBDCs, with stable coins coming. And this is a topic that is very dear, especially to Larry Fink, who has been pushing tokenization extremely hard over the last few years. Especially if you look just at 2025, the number of papers and articles that he personally put out on this topic, his annual, chairman letter to BlackRock.
So long clip, lengthy clip, but I think it explains a lot of the signal that we did see coming out of the Davos 2026 annual meeting. They're all talking about resets. They're all freaking out. Again, I think that's because we are entering a very interesting time. I think it's becoming clear that the next few years are going to be very interesting. I want to look at this chart, looking at the German hyperinflation in a moment. I think it's going to be super constructive and super useful. Again, I want to also zoom out and just show you guys how nuts what we saw was. $15 trillion wiped from gold and silver in a day. $15 trillion is the total valuation of Nvidia, Alphabet, Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon combined. The world's most valuable companies. Don't want you guys to think that we're just talking about problems. Again, it's just something I want to put on your radar. Just be very careful if you don't have the physical gold yourself. I saw this story. It's kind of alarming. Poor gentleman in the UK, he ordered gold online, $10,000 of gold. It's 100 grams. So I believe that's a little over 3 ounces of gold. It's actually worth $15,000 now. I'm not going to play the clip because I have a lot of videos to show you guys today, but they lost it in the mail and they gave him $750 and a punch in the chest. Imagine that. Rob Hobson said the 0.1 kilo gold bar he bought as an investment was lost. He said he sent it with special delivery and extra insurance. Too bad he didn't read the fine print, and even though he specifically bought insurance, for the package in the mail, he got compensated $750 and a pack of half-chewed chewing gum. You'd be filthy. Royal Mail said it was investigating and it would be in direct contact with Mr. Hobson. And now we can see Devon and Cornwall police said officers were carrying out inquiries after receiving a report of the missing item. This just shows you how useless the system is. They don't give a squat about your money. Not even a t-shirt, says Bill. Imagine that. Right now, that gold bar, gold's at about $5,000 an ounce. That gold bar is worth $15,000. And he got a slap in the face, essentially. $750 is what he got. Here's your compensation. You'd be filthy. Absolutely filthy. But I'll remind you, don't let stories like this discourage you. If you are a gold bull, don't buy the paper. Again, this is what I was reminding you guys about earlier on in the introduction. This is the Royal Mint. Again, fact check me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is the company that's been open for 1,000 years in the UK. They're the biggest bullion dealer in the UK. I could have my wires crossed here. But these are the guys who are right now talking about the London gold shortage, and they've now stopped selling their gold and silver. We can see this is an announcement. The Royal Mint restricts sale of 1 ounce gold and silver, Britannia's. We're just seeing a lot of this talk of shortages accelerate. Again, be very careful. Again, a drawdown to having gold and silver physical is trying to cross borders with it. As we can see, one plane passenger, well, he would have had a pretty uncomfortable trip if there's a little bit of turbulence or it was a bit bumpy, because he had some quote-unquote nuggets hidden in the rectum here, trying to avoid taxes. Ouch! That would absolutely hurt. Again, I want to be very actionable here and talk about the solutions. Gold and silver, it's a great way to have money outside of the system, but unless you actually have it in your own self-custody, it's not worth a dime. Especially if we are living through a reset right now. If you have money in a vault, trust me, that money is not going to be returned to you. Okay? This is why I always congratulate my gold and silver holding gold bugs. But I always remind you, hey, probably good to hold some money that you can actually have outside the system. This is why we always talk about Bitcoin. And again, the importance of mining Bitcoin so you can buy it privately. Biggest problem with gold and silver is the days of getting your hands on it anonymously, they're gone. Again, trying to buy gold and silver, you've got to give up your ID. I found that out this week when I went to go buy some gold and silver, a small amount of gold and silver here in Peru, because I'm making a video for you guys. Impossible to buy it without giving up your ID. This is why I'm a big fan of Bitcoin. Again, if you own gold and silver, consider getting maybe some diversification. I love Bitcoin because you can mine it. My partner Blockware can teach you how to mine it anonymously. Again, I highly recommend you guys book a call with Blockware down below if you want to buy the mining rigs yourself and get the capital gains write-off on your taxes, or whether you want to take advantage of their hosted mining services. Again, Blockware hosts clients at 6 different facilities all across America. So again, I think that's an absolute no-brainer if you are looking for a little bit of diversification. Again, if you do end up getting your hands on some Bitcoin, put it in your own self-custody. This is why I always talk about the hardware wallets. Trezor and Ledger have some great solutions for you guys. What's the number one rule of anything? And this should also apply to gold and silver. Not your assets in your own self-custody. You don't own it. This is why I always say, look, Bitcoin's a great option because you can put $1 billion of Bitcoin in a little USB and you can cross a border. You don't have to F around and find out, like our gentleman smuggling gold learned the hard way. I want to answer some questions here in a moment, but before I do, I want to just remind you, be very careful out there, moving borders with your gold and silver. You don't want to be caught in a situation like this. But I want to talk a little bit more about the reset times, because what we're seeing in gold and silver right now, like we said, it's a 1 in a 5 septillion year event. It's supposed to never happen. But this volatility that we're seeing, it's not like we've never seen it before. I want to walk you through the last time that we saw volatility like this in the precious metals market. And I want to go through one of my favorite charts that is looking at the volatility of what gold did during the 1920s when Germany saw its hyperinflationary event. Because as you can see, if you look at the chart of this to the chart of gold today, it's really difficult to not find a lot of similarities. And I think the volatility we're beginning to see, it's super interesting. So again, we're going to dive into this in about 30 seconds. I just want to play the rest of this clip from Ursula von der Leyen first and quickly plug in my laptop charger.
Instant, the foundations of the Bretton Woods system and the entire global economic order set up after the war effectively collapsed. But it also had two major effects. It inadvertently created the conditions for what would become a truly global order, and it provided a sharp lesson for Europe and on the need to strengthen its economic and political power. It was a warning to reduce our dependencies, in this case, on a foreign currency. The world may be very different today, without any question, but I believe the lesson is very much the same. That geopolitical shocks can and must serve as an opportunity for Europe. And in my view, the seismic change we are going through today is an opportunity, in fact, a necessity, to build a new form of Europe.
So again, what I want you guys to pay attention to, she's not mincing her words. Europe needs to take advantage of any geopolitical opportunity. She's openly saying it's reset times. That's what she's saying in this clip. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about reset times, because I think the volatility that we're beginning to see in the market is making me feel like it is reset times. First, I just want to answer Joe's question. The biggest problem with gold, you can't just put it in your carry-on, because if they find more than $10,000 of gold in your carry-on, from my understanding, it gets confiscated. You actually have to, like, when you go through TSA, you're not allowed to take more than $10,000 of cash, and I believe that law applies to gold and silver. It's money. This is why this gentleman here was trying to smuggle his gold and silver in his rectum, because it's not allowed. It's kind of wild when you think about it, because it's kind of like, hey, if you want to move countries, assume that you're in the UK and you don't want to retweet something on Twitter and risk going to jail. So you want to leave, but how do you do it? It's really tough to do it if you've got your wealth in gold and silver. This is why I always talk about hardware wallets and Bitcoin. You could have $1 billion in one of these. Again, I want to touch wood. I've traveled to 50 plus countries over the past 3 years. I've never had an issue traveling with one of these. Again, if you do want to diversify and get your hands on some Bitcoin, take self-custody. All Night Hider, my man, has slapped links to Blockware, Trezor, and Ledger in the live chat, so take advantage of those. Again, Trezor and Ledger, they make the simplest, easiest to use hardware wallets in the whole space. Both of those guys have been around for more than a decade. If you don't own your Bitcoin in your own self-custody, you do not own it, especially when we are living through these times. So what I want to talk about is where we are on this chart right here. Because a lot of people think, oh, it was easy to make money. It was easy to protect your wealth during the hyperinflation of the German mark during the 1920s. It certainly wasn't, because as you can see, look at all of the volatility. So the black line on this chart is showing us the price of gold in German marks. As you can see, it kind of slowly creeps higher, and then it goes absolutely parabolic in 1922 and 1923. But what I'm more interested by, and again, to put this into perspective, I want to show you how much the price of one bread loaf costs in the 1920s, to show you why this process always catches most people off guard, because it happens much quicker than most people could ever imagine. As we can see, the loaf of bread costed 1 mark, so like $1 in 1918. In 1922, 163 marks. In 1923, it went to 1.5 million marks. And then 2 months later, in November 1923, it was 200 billion marks. So as you can see, these things, they don't happen in a very easily predictable way. Once you're in reset times, things can get away from you very quickly, which is why I'm making this video today, warning you about gold and silver. Sure, there's a chance silver's topped for 5 years. And maybe silver's going to do what it's done on 3 occasions before in history. When we zoom out here, maybe, again, I just want to explore what could be happening with you guys. I don't know. But maybe what we're seeing is just one of these spikes. Maybe what we're seeing right now is just silver's next spike. Well, that's a terrible circle. That's a possibility. I don't know. But you could also be living through an economic reset right now, which is why I would encourage everybody. Just have your mind open to all outcomes. I don't know what's happening. And especially during very uncertain times, very dangerous idea to be all in on anything. Especially when they're incredibly unpredictable times. So who knows? Maybe silver's going to crash. Maybe not. Let's have a look at the case for why it might not be. If you look at the price of gold and if you compare it to what happened in the 1920s, I fired this tweet off in, well, this is last year. I said 1922 equals 2025. Let me draw the analogy or the comparison here. So as you can see in gold, we hit a little peak here in late 1919. This was right before 1920. And as you can see, gold consolidated here for 2 full years. We didn't make a new all-time high until very early 2022. But when we did, what happened? Melt up. I mean, you can see I wrote it on the chart. We are here. If I had to guess, I actually think we are here. Maybe we're in the first correction in a parabolic melt up. Again, I know there's going to be a lot of people giving me shit for this video, calling me out, saying I'm a hyperinflationary doomer. I don't care. I think most people think the risk that we're going through an economic reset is 0% or a 1% chance. I think the odds are much higher. I think it's more like 20 to 30% chance. And that's all because of the macro environment. There's a reason why the elites are freaking out. They're trying to rush through CBDCs, digital IDs. They're losing control. Bank collapses are happening. Again, if you join the stream late, Chicago's bank collapsed on Friday. We've got bank runs in China. As you can see, watch this video. I don't know what's going on, but some dude's getting carried out. Look at this. He's getting carried out of the gold bank. A private online gold trading platform in China just closed its doors. Supposedly, it has $20 billion of assets. As you can see, things are heating up. People are getting carried out by their arms and legs. If we are living through reset times, be very careful. Again, if you own the physical gold and silver, be very careful. If you own the physical Bitcoin, be very careful, because as we can see, known physical attacks to steal Bitcoin are increasing dramatically right now. Now, this, again, I know we're talking about Bitcoin physical attacks, but this applies to gold and silver holders as well. I'll show you why in a moment. Physical attacks on crypto holders. Why are wrench assaults rising? I'll show you why. This is a really sad story. It's a scary story. But what's happening is tax authorities in the UK are literally leaking the public information of people who own Bitcoin. So again, if you own Bitcoin, you have to declare it to the government. Well, now what's happening is the tax authorities in France are leaking information about cryptocurrency holders. I know what you might be thinking. Oh, that's impossible. There's no way that my trusted government employees could be doing this. Well, you can see French public office hit with $5 million fine after massive data leak. And if you look at the global attacks on people holding Bitcoin, have a look at the last 10. So on the 25th of January, this week, an attack happened in France. A 74-year-old man was kidnapped by individuals seeking to extort cryptocurrency from his son. And what I love here is that it's all linked. The data is all linked. This here is from Jamison Lop's website. So again, kudos to Jamison for putting this together. But what do you notice about the last 10 physical attacks in January 2026? This is the date of them. More than half of them are in France. January 4th, France. January 6th, France. January 8th, France. January 9th, France. January 10th, France. January 10th, Belgium. January 14th, France. January 16th, the Philippines. January 25th, once again, yours truly, France. Be incredibly careful out there if you are anybody holding Bitcoin in France or Europe in particular. Again, so many people ask me, Luke, are you an idiot for talking about Bitcoin on YouTube? Probably. But again, I always remind you guys, I'm personally okay with talking about Bitcoin because I have my security upgraded. I have multi-signature Bitcoin wallets. For those who don't know, that means I have wallets where, for example, I have 3 of these. For me to move any of my Bitcoin, I have to get 2 signatures from these 3 wallets. Not these specific 3. These are just my play wallets. But I have these wallets in different countries. I can't physically move my Bitcoin. Can't do it. It's because I've upgraded my security. Again, if you want to be able to do this very easily, I actually have a link to one of my partners in the description down below. Bitvault has created an application on your mobile that makes creating a multi-signature wallet, very easy and accessible for everybody. You don't need to be a technical nerd to be able to do it, which is why I always remind you about what Bitvault has created. I believe you're going to get a 10% discount on any of the subscriptions that you want to get from Bitvault down below. So again, as they say, traditional wallets aren't enough, especially if you're in France. They create time-delayed transactions, which means you can time lock a Bitcoin wallet. You can lock the wallet for a year or 10 years. This is not only great for security, but it's great for inheritance planning. So again, if you are in France looking to escape the rising number of wrench attacks, I think Bitvault is a great solution. Because again, if we have French tax authorities leaking information about Bitcoin holders, that's as scary as it gets. Be very careful out there. Protect your wealth as if the government is not protecting you. That goes for people with gold and silver as well, naturally. So that's actually not true to Wilfred's comment. If you protect your Bitcoin the way it should be protected, your Bitcoin is not gone. This is why I always talk about the tools that you guys should be learning to use. Again, another tool that I always encourage you guys to use is correct backups. Again, don't put your Bitcoin 12 or 24 word backup on paper. Put it on titanium. I always tell you guys to learn more about what Stampseed is creating here. Again, if you've got your Bitcoin in a hardware wallet, and if that hardware wallet is backed up with titanium, and these are in separate locations, you're set. You cannot lose your Bitcoin at the click of a button. Again, Stampseed, by the way, I believe they're also running a massive winter sale. So that means if you use the normal discount, Luke15, that promo code, you're going to get an even bigger discount. As we can see, yes, so Stampseed is still running their winter sale. So you can get up to 20, sometimes up to 30% off many of the stamping kits that you can get from Stampseed. So go check those out while the sale still lasts. And again, I want to talk a little bit more about where we are, what's happening right now, because silver has officially hyperinflated against the dollar. Or let me say that correctly. The dollar has hyperinflated against silver for 3 months in a row now. Something else I'll remind you of is if $15 trillion got wiped off the gold and silver market in one day, just be very careful out there. Like a lot of people have these mental models assuming that Bitcoin, for example, can never go parabolic because we've seen diminishing returns for 3 data points. Just be very careful out there. Ah, the wife is trolling me for yapping for an hour. Oh, actually, I have an anniversary dinner, a very important one that I have to go to. So I'm going to have to end this one shortly. Let me answer a couple more questions first. Bitcoin is energy, as simple as that. That's how I personally think about Bitcoin. Again, understanding Bitcoin, I think it's the most complicated thing on the planet. If you do want help or a hands-on Bitcoin coach, I always encourage you guys to book a call with the Bitcoin Way. I know that some of the tools in Bitcoin can be complicated. Like some people might have never used a hardware wallet before. I get it. It's daunting. If you need your hand held in the process of taking custody of your Bitcoin, you can reach out to the Bitcoin Way. You can book a free 30-minute consultation down below with those guys, and they can help you out. With all that said, I might say, look, I think somewhere between 5 and 50 years, we'll probably start mining asteroids with gold and silver. I know that's a big range. I don't want to sound like the power law bros. Let me narrow that. I think it's very likely we see it between 10 and 20 years. but I would keep an open mind for it to come sooner. Could come in 5 years. And I also, a lot of people say this as well about Bitcoin. It can be hacked by quantum computing. So firstly, we already have quantum proof and quantum ready hardware wallets. A lot of people don't know this about the brand new Trezor Safe 7. This is quantum ready. So if quantum came out tomorrow and started hacking Bitcoin wallets, you can literally click 3 buttons on your laptop, plug in your Trezor, update your firmware on your Trezor Safe 7, and you're protected. So that's the first kind of like FUD piece. Again, this is why I've partnered with Trezor. Highly recommend you go and get a Trezor Safe 7. But again, even if quantum comes along, Bitcoin can solve that and route around that so easily. It would be chaotic for a week, but we just see a hard fork and Bitcoin would just upgrade to a new encryption algorithm that's quantum resistant. It would be that simple. Everybody holding Bitcoin has the same incentives. So yes, to make a change to Bitcoin, you do need the majority of people to buy into that change. You might see a chain split. I don't think, who knows whether it'd be a soft fork or a hard fork. I'm not a technical expert, but there are solutions to quantum. I'd be far more concerned about the traditional banking system than Bitcoin, sorry. If anybody has any more points they want me to address before I show you my last chart I want to show you today. Good to see you as well, Elaine. I want to hear from you. When do you think we'll be mining asteroids? Have I just lost my mind? I honestly, I'm not an expert on it, so I don't know. 10 to 20 years, that's my bet. Show you one more chart before I get myself in trouble. Nobody has any flippant idea where the price of gold and silver is going to be this week. Nobody, myself included. I have no idea. What I will continue to remind you guys about is we are living in an economic reset. Be prepared for everything. Be prepared for silver to crash to $30 on Monday or for it to go to $300. The same applies for Bitcoin. Bitcoin right now, $78, $78,000. God, I hope it's not 78. $78,000. For me, wake me up. I'm tired. I'm tired, boss. I don't feel anything. Because for me, I'm prepared to wake up tomorrow and see Bitcoin at 30,000 or 300,000. And if it's at any of those price levels, nothing's changed in my fundamental thesis of Bitcoin. To be honest, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw 30K or 300K tomorrow, overnight. Because we are living in such dramatic times. You've got central banks mining Bitcoin, central banks buying Bitcoin. You've got central banks buying gold and silver, draining the bullion vaults. These are reset times. So I'll just remind you, be prepared for reset times. Learn to use the tools. Don't trust gold and silver in a vault. Go take self-custody of it. Protect your wealth and touch grass and relax. When you have money outside the system, I personally just sleep easier at night. Again, while the markets are crashing, you should not be selling. Please don't sell any of your assets. If you own Bitcoin, I always encourage you to, if you do want to borrow against your Bitcoin responsibly, Firefish is the best place to do that. They use multi-signature vaults, and they've literally open sourced their entire source code to show you how they use multi-signature vaults and escrow vaults. They are not a black box like many of the options in the Bitcoin space are. I think they're the best option, which is why I partner with them. They're going to give you 30% off if you use promo code Luke. So take advantage of that. Learn to use the tools and stay safe out there. I think volatility is in vogue. It's as simple as that. With that said, guys, I've been yapping for 70 minutes. I've got to run. I'm super late to dinner. So I'll see you all in the next one.